So now I have a hole in my chest with blood leaking out. I'm like, I got to play football. And it was like a moment where everything changed with me. When I go back to that, if one guy even comes to look at me, I'll be ready. I was ready. The numbers went in, and the next thing you know, I flew to Green Bay for a visit. I flew to Minnesota, and now all of a sudden they're like, well, who's this Canadian kid? Next thing by draft day, I got drafted in the 7th round by the Jacksonville Jaguars from the school that makes prime ministers, doctors, lawyers, and teachers. Awesome is his origin story.
Okay.
So if we go into...
Do you mean the hot dog story?
Yeah. It's the best story ever.
Let's start there then.
My name's Sheldon Napastuk. I was born and raised in a small town or the farm outside of North Battleford, Saskatchewan. And, I think my whole life, obviously anybody from Saskatchewan greens bleed. You don't even, bleeds green. You don't even know why. You just grew up a Riders fan. And, so got a chance to go see a bunch of games. The Riders were coming to North Battleford in the off season. It was always really cool. And I knew from an early age, that's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
So I ended up moving to North Battleford for high school, got the scholarship down to Iowa State University, and played some years there. And when I came back up, one of the challenges is getting into the CFL, especially as a defensive tackle. Small rosters, and as a backup defensive tackle, you better have another useful attribute, long snapping, special teams. But I had none of that. So I was basically, you make it as a starter or bust, right? So first year, go to Edmonton training camp with Ron Lancaster, practice roster for a couple weeks, and then bust. Ron Lancaster went to Hamilton the next year. So I went to training camp with them, but the guys that they brought me in to replace, one guy he decided not to retire, the other guy, Jeff Cummings, came back from the NFL, bust. And I found myself in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. A buddy of mine, he had a coffee franchise at the time, and he was having me write his manuals, training manuals, sales manuals. And as a side gig, I picked up a couple of hot dog carts and was selling hot dogs.
Can you say the name?
Yeah, Mr. Tube Steak.
Yeah, I just think that's,
little entrepreneurial spirit there. I love it.
Yeah, and so there it was. It was a down summer, right? Because I spent the last 2 years training hard, trying to make the CFL, and it just didn't work out. So now I'm in Saskatoon, and at night I'd have one of the carts outside of a nightclub. And everybody's coming outside for their dogs at the end of the night. Saskatchewan Roughriders had their training camp in Saskatoon back then.
Okay.
And so here I am. It was sometime in, I don't know, May, June. And I've got the cart set up, and all of a sudden these guys are coming out of the bar. Yo, man, get me a dog, get me everybody's, I'm just lining up all these guys, and I'm like, wow. Three years ago, I was playing in front of 90,000 people in the Big 12. And now I'm serving these guys hot dogs. And it was just absolutely killing me inside. And, so I did what any, self-respecting Saskatchewan farm boy would do. And I called up my mom, and I said, Mom, I don't know where I went wrong. Like, it's just, this is killing me. And she says, well, call them up and tell them you want to play. Oh, Mom, it's pro sports. Don't just say, can I play too? You don't know how it works. She's like, well, if I don't know anything about football, don't complain to me. And, I sat there and I started thinking to myself, you know what, this isn't going to change by itself. She's right. I've at least got to make the call.
Yeah.
So I gave him a call. Sure enough, no call back. They're still in training camp. Called 2-3 times, but nobody would call me back. So finally, about 3 weeks later, it's week 2 of the season, and there's rumblings of defensive lineman injuries, and I'm like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to shut down the carts this day. I'm going to drive down to Regina, 2.5 hours, and I'm just going to talk to them.
Heck yeah.
So, did it. Shut down the carts, drove down to Regina, waited probably about 4 or 5 hours for them to get out of meetings and practice, and then Coach Cal Murphy comes walking out, and I walk up to him with a game film in my hand, big smile on my face. He's almost rolling his eyes like, oh, no. And I'm like, hey, Coach, Sheldon Napastuk. Hey, I'm sorry, I should have gotten back to you, but no, we're good with the guys we have right now. We're not looking for any extra bodies. I said, here I am. I'm just up the road, and I'm ready to go when you are.
Nice.
And jumped back in my car, 2.5 hours back to Saskatoon. Walked into the house, the phone rings. Hey, the defensive coordinator was checking that out. Any chance we can get you on film tomorrow? Just want to see how you're moving and stuff, and just get some film on you. Absolutely. Shut down the carts the next morning, drove to Regina.
So this is early 20s? You're like 20?
Yeah, I'm 20. At this time, I think I'm 23, 24. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just before my 24th birthday.
Crazy.
And get down there. I didn't even have turf shoes. I had to borrow Andrew Green's turf shoes that were like a size and a half too big for me. They ran me through about 15 minutes of drills, and just said, okay, all right, well, we got you on film. We'll let you know if there's any need. Drive 2.5 hours back to Saskatoon. Phone rings. You're moving to Regina.
Wow.
And I was only on for about 6-7 games that year and a few weeks on practice roster. But it opened up the opportunity to get in there and play. I mean, the 2 years before that, I was training like crazy. Here, I was down to 260 pounds. I wasn't in game form, but I could still run.
Yeah.
And I was going to take any opportunity I got. They got fired at the end of the year. The new staff didn't know who I was. They didn't contact me during free agency or anything to renew the contract. But about 2 months before camp, called me up, just said, hey, we need an extra body. You want to come do it? Yeah. I was starting in week 2. So
persistence pays off, and adversity is fuel for success, man. It's crazy. What a story to start with.
Well, the main point of that story is listen to your mom. And she's not going to steer you wrong.
That's all you got to do. Moms know best.
Yeah, no, they do.
Randy, I was told before this conversation that I got to keep you in check. So we'll let you intro. We'll keep it at a couple minutes, but I know you've got, maybe it might take you that long to list off all the teams you played with. But
Well, my name is Randy Chevrier. I played most of my career in the CFL, 16 years, mostly with the Calgary Stampeders. I spent some time in the NFL before CFL, coming out of college with the Cowboys, the Jaguars, the Jets, and the Bengals. Yeah, and my origin story is a little different than Sheldon's. The majority of the learnings I got was before I became a pro.
Okay.
I didn't have that quick fast track to the U.S. NCAA college, which I think is a story probably in and of itself. I started football at the age of 18. I was a late bloomer in all sports. I played house league hockey my entire life. I was on the swim team in high school, and I always loved sports, but I wasn't an elite athlete.
Okay.
After high school, I was looking for something to do. I was trying to get into the military. I didn't get in because of bad eyesight. I missed all my hockey camps, and I had buddies that played football and said, hey, you got to try this out. So it took me some courage because I knew nothing about football in Montreal. Growing up in the 80s, the Alouettes had left town. Football wasn't big at all. And, I was looking for something to do. So I remember walking on the field of the midget football team there and asking the coach, who was Coach Machocha, wound up coaching in the CFL and is the Alouettes' current coach and general manager. And I said, hey, Coach, I know nothing about football, but I like to hit. So he's like, well, I'll go play with the defensive line. So, I try out with the defensive line. I played 4 games. I made an all-star team, and that was really cool. But I still didn't know if I loved football. The next year I didn't play because I just thought, I'm going to focus on school. I was getting older. I was 18. I was like, maybe I need to focus on life after sports. But when I was 19, I really, really felt the itch to play sport again. I just couldn't leave sport behind. And I played what is like junior college in Quebec. We have the CEGEP system. Yeah. So I played 1 year for the Vanier Cheetahs, which is a pretty highly renowned program out there. And I had a good season. I wasn't a star. We had some star guys going to NCAA from that school. And I remember all the guys were like, Chev, you should come back and play another year, because it's one of those things where you could go back and play.
Right.
And I was done CEGEP at that time. I had already completed 2.5 years. I didn't want to go back just for football. And I remember telling all the guys, I said, and I was very naive. I said, you know what, if I'm going to make it, I'm going to make it anywhere I go. Okay. And I didn't realize how naive that statement was. Like, I didn't realize the systems, the politics, the camps, I just said, I'm going to work hard and I'll make it no matter where I go. And I didn't have a ton of money or resources, and my parents didn't either. So I wasn't going to go walk on out of school outside of Montreal. I had 2 choices. It was McGill or Concordia. Okay. And I looked at which one would prepare me for life after university. And I thought, McGill, I could get a teaching degree. So I applied to McGill University into education, and I got onto the football team. And I had a 5-year career at McGill. There were some ups and downs. My 3rd year, I got into a major car accident like 3 days before camp and broke some ribs. So I missed most of the camp, but I came back and had a good season. By my 4th year, there was a couple of guys ahead of me that were long snapping that went onto the CFL. And I thought, gosh, if I want to play pro, I should learn how to do this long snapping thing. So I remember after my 3rd year, I asked my coach, Coach Bailey, he's a legend in the CFL and in Canadian university ranks. I said, Coach, I want to learn how to long snap. And he kind of chewed on his cigar and he laughed. He's like, well, I guess you could try. And he threw me a football, and that was like for me permission to do it. And so I practiced snapping every day. I was a really good defensive tackle, but I needed this tool. And I learned this skill on my own. Like, there was no YouTube back then. There was no internet. Like, the internet was just starting. So everything was like self-taught or working with a guy in the locker room. That's about it. Like, there's no like go on Instagram and watch a million tutorials. It was like, how do I do this?
Yeah.
But I taught myself how. And in my 4th year, I came back and I won the starting job as long snapper. So that was going well. I was a really good defensive tackle. My buddy JP, who was a snapper at McGill before me, played a year with the Argonauts. And then after my 4th year, JP signs with the Seattle Seahawks. So now I'm like, well, I practiced with this guy. I played with this guy.
Yeah.
If he could go to the Seahawks, why can't I?
Yeah.
So I told everybody, I want to go to the NFL. And guys like, you're crazy. It's McGill. Like, we produce teachers, doctors, lawyers, prime ministers. We don't produce NFL football players. JP was an anomaly, right? I was like, I'm going to go. And so heading into my 5th year, I was like, I'm not just going to the CFL draft. I'm going to the NFL draft. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I'm going to train as if someone's going to watch me and someone's going to find me, and I'll be ready if that happens. So I get to my summer before my 5th year at McGill, and I was working as a doorman. I got stabbed in the chest. So I got stabbed in the chest. It was at the Old Peel Pub, Montreal. I was, within inches of my liver. And I remember that day was a crazy day. I was running with the track team. So I ran with not the track team, the track coach. And I always ran with the DBs and the small guys because I figured if I can keep up with the small guys, I could be faster than the big guys.
No doubt.
And I was always slower than those small guys, but then when I ran with the big guys, I was fast.
Yeah.
But that day I had so many shin splints. I was in pain. I think I smashed my shins on the stairs at Molson Stadium, and I was bleeding. And I was like, why do I do this? Like, I have a teaching degree now. I had completed my degree. Yeah. I was like, I could go teach and make money for the first time in my life. Like I said, I didn't have a lot growing up. I was like, I could make good money teaching. I said, and I said, I train like 3-4 hours a day for how many minutes of all-out effort in a season? Probably 10 minutes of all-out effort. Like, if you take a play that lasts 8 seconds, a defensive lineman goes 3 seconds, you take all those 3 seconds together, might make 10 minutes. Here I am 3 hours a day, sweating, bleeding, in pain, when I could do something else. And that day I was going to quit. And then that night I went to work, I got stabbed, and I fell on the ground, my lung deflated, and all I remember is, I got to get up. I got to play football again. That's all I could think of. It galvanized me, like, I got to play football. I didn't even think about that morning when my shins were hurting. So now I have a hole in my chest with blood leaking out. I'm like, I got to play football. And it was like a moment where everything changed with me. You talk about moms. This was a crazy story. It was like 3 a.m, and here I am. They're just about to put a tube in my chest, right? And 2 doctors are talking to me. I just remember the walls were all white in the hospital. Next thing, at 3 a.m, and it couldn't have been that long from when I got stabbed to when I was in the hospital room, but somehow my mom shows up right as they're putting the tube in my chest, and I see her face like as if it was zoomed in. I was like, get her out of here, right? Yeah. Like, it was just one of these crazy, surreal experiences. That whole night was crazy. And I remember the doctors told me, most of the doctors said, you'll not play again this year. But I found one doctor, Dr. Fleiser. He was a former McGill grad. He won the Heck Creighton back in the day. His son, Tim Fleiser. Yeah, so David Fleiser was his dad. Yeah. So he was a surgeon. I said, Dr. Fleiser, you got to give me a protocol to get back to the field. I don't accept I'm not playing this year. Wow. So he said, listen, take 7 weeks, rest. Don't do a thing. And then when those 7 weeks are done, you can get back to training. Well, 7 weeks took me to 5 weeks before the season. And imagine sitting in a chair for 7 weeks, not even able to go for a jog because they were worried that. Yeah. So I wound up losing all my strength. Everything I was training for, I lost it all. And now I had 5 weeks to at least get back into playing shape. So I took those 5 weeks, and they said, well, train once a day. Now that's where I kind of cheated a little bit. In the morning, I went to the gym at McGill by the doctor's office, but then I bought a membership at a muscle gym down in Montreal. It's called The Rock. And I would go train there. So I trained twice a day. I took 5 weeks, and I got back to the season, and I got to the point where I was the day I got stabbed. Like, I was 275 pounds. I was fast, I was strong, but I wasn't where I wanted to be.
6% body fat.
No, definitely not. The thing is I climbed back from that really terrible spot. I got to a point where I could play, and I wound up having an amazing season. Like, I have to say, I always say, like, for me, I was raised Catholic. I have a spiritual relationship with Jesus. I don't know how you form it, but I do believe that I'm not that good. I was never a great athlete. And I'm not that lucky because I still haven't won once in the lottery in all the years I've tried to play. But I think something was at work that allowed me to be really successful. Not just, hey, he's an adequate player. Like, I was the best defensive tackle in all of Canada that year. And I don't say that because I'm cocky, but I'm just like, I don't know how that happened.
Yeah.
Because I was lying in a hospital bed with a tube in my chest for 2 weeks. And I came back and I wound up getting invited to, not only did I win the Metris as the lineman of the year in Canada, but then I got invited to the East-West Shrine game. And because I was a long snapper and not many college stars do the special teams role with their teams, I was able to do both and I had a great game. And this is kind of the tie into Sheldon's story. I come back to McGill. I had a great game at the East-West Shrine game against all these American guys. And Cal Murphy, who was a scout for the Indianapolis Colts, at the time, he used to be the head coach for Saskatchewan Roughriders when Sheldon was there. Cal Murphy is now the scout for the Indianapolis Colts.
So I got him fired by my bad play, and then he goes down to Indiana.
Well, if you didn't get him fired and he wasn't at Indianapolis, he would never flown to Montreal and say, Chevy, listen. He's like, we don't need a long snapper. We got a great guy. He's like, but I'm going to work you out, and I'm going to put your numbers in. And he's like, and he had a real strong tie to Canada. I think his wife was from Canada. He loved the CFL, loved the Canadian kids.
Okay.
He said, once this goes through the wire, people are going to wonder who this kid is, and it might stir up some interest. And that's exactly what happened. He came up. I tested really well at McGill. I snapped, I ran, I did all the things. I was ready. When I go back to that, if one guy even comes to look at me, I'll be ready. I was ready. The numbers went in, and then next thing you know, I flew to Green Bay for a visit. I flew to Minnesota. And now all of a sudden they're like, well, who's this Canadian kid? And next thing by draft day, I got drafted in the 7th round by the Jacksonville Jaguars from the school that makes prime ministers, doctors, lawyers, and teachers.
Yeah.
And, you know, Sheldon's story is listen to your mom. Mine is, you know what, don't let anyone place a limit on what you can do. Doesn't matter if you're in Canada, doesn't matter if you're in Alaska, doesn't matter if you're in Iceland. If you believe you can make it and you work towards it, if that one person shows up, now I know that was a chance in a million, and there's a lot of odds that played into my favor for it to get there. But if I didn't train like I was going to be ready for that day, I wouldn't have been ready when he showed up.
Congratulations, because I just like that alone, that story gives me some goosebumps here. But one of the things that I love about the two of you is the fact that you've got your show yourselves. You've been on radio in the past. Now you've got the ride running. How do we call it the ride?
The ride, yeah.
With Chevy Nasty.
Yeah. So make sure that you guys give it a follow there for those who are listening, watching. But you guys have been able to build after sport just as much as you were in sport. I wanted to ask you what it was like playing for the home province, Saskatchewan Roughriders. That's got to be a surreal feeling for you growing up and then being able to represent the green.
You know, it was. I mean, it was a bit of a mind trip too, because it was kind of a longer path than I'd expected. I was in college dreaming of getting to the NFL by that point, but tore off a pec, and that kind of slowed me down getting in. But when I got a chance to actually get into Taylor Field and into that locker room, which was a horrible locker room, probably second worst to Hamilton, and Winnipeg had a bad one back then. But yeah, I was there amongst the legends, right? And there's a lot of players, or Dan Farthing, all these guys that I've been watching playing for years that were in that locker room. Dan Rasevich, players from another era, but were amazing to me to meet. So yeah, that was great. But I'll tell you, you find really quickly, all the fun stories about how you get there. Once you get there, you're not there. You're never there, especially in your first couple of years. There's a few guys that are, number 1, number 2 draft picks. Once you're there, it's Chevy talks about, I don't even know how I became the best defensive tackle in CIS. Well, I know. It's just absolute dedication to your skills and fundamentals and techniques. You have to be obsessive, almost manic to the point, because everything that you're doing is getting caught from 2 camera angles. So you go spend an hour and a half on the field, but then you will spend 2 hours in film being questioned, why did you step this way when your read was clearly giving you that, and you're correcting your hand placement. And at least that was my experience. I had to be maniacal about that. So I enjoyed Regina.
Yeah.
It took a couple of years till I really felt like I was getting the game down. But I met my wife there, met the family, and of course they're all huge Rider fans. Yeah. So it was a great 4 years. didn't have a great relationship with Roy Shivers, the GM at the time. Like, I certainly liked him. I'm not sure they liked me.
Right.
But
Can't please everyone.
Can't please everyone. So then the decision was made to, go to Calgary there during free agency, which was funny because, when we used to go from Saskatchewan to Calgary, you walk into the stadium and this stadium when we were there was like, 70%, 60% Rider fans. Hey, Napastuk, yeah, let's go. I'm seeing guys from my hometown, and it was exciting, right? So it was great to travel as a Saskatchewan Roughrider. But then the second I signed for Stampeders, I'd go into that same stadium, and those guys would cheer for me as a Stamp, but then when the Riders came to town, hey, Napastuk, you effing traitor, and it's like, dude, like, what are you doing here? Are you guys on vacation? No, I work here. Well, yeah, I work here too. Like, come on, man.
Sorry, they're paying me. I got to do my job.
Yeah, but it was, so to be a part of the Rider organization, honestly, it was a treat. It was hard. It can be frustrating some years. But yeah, a lot of good guys down there, and met my wife. My father-in-law was driving bus for the city of Regina at that point, and on game days he would throw on his Stampeders jersey, and he'd be harassed the whole day, right? He'd take it off the second got home. But it was an interesting experience in Regina. You talked about small city, big town. Regina is just it's like a college town feel on game day, right? Yeah. Everybody loves the Riders. Everybody follows them. Not all the fans are as knowledgeable as they think they are, but man, are they passionate.
Well, and one of the things I think I heard one of you guys saying on your show is the fact that, like, it's an honor to play for any professional team, no matter who they are. At the end of the day, whether it's a Habs fan who's now playing out in Calgary, you know what? You're still representing that team, that organization. You talked about different eras in the CFL. 2012, I remember you tweeting out to The Rock, getting him to reply about some of his mattress and what he was making on a weekly basis. You want to share that story, what it was like?
Well, it was interesting because I saw his, in 2012, I saw the, he had mentioned his $7 production. This is before the XFL. This is right when he was in the HBO Ballers. Like, he still hadn't blown up to where he is now, but he mentioned a little bit of that, and I think I tweeted to him, "Man, what about the couch you were sleeping on?" My old roommate when I was in Edmonton, Roger Reinson, who he's got 4 Grey Cup rings with Calgary, BC, and 2 with Edmonton, and we were roommates early on in my CFL career. And Raj was teammates with The Rock, and Raj said, "Yeah, The Rock slept on his couch a bunch of times." So I kind of tweeted that at him, and he's like, "Yeah, I slept on Raj's couch until I grabbed a piss-stained mattress from Hotel Village right back here." And that was his mattress, right? So that was kind of cool. Like that was a highlight of my life, getting tweeted back by The Rock. But yeah, like, everyone's got a story where they start, right? And
a lot of Lysol.
Yeah, a lot of Lysol for sure. But it's funny. Like, everyone's got a story where they start, but it doesn't always wind up how you pictured it or how you dreamt it. We talk about, Sheldon made a great point there. Once you get there, you're not there. I remember draft day. I was locked up in my sister's bedroom because she was the only one in the house that had a dial-up internet computer that took the phone line. Like, people that might listen don't know what this is, but it's like, if you were on the internet, no one could call you. And there were no cell phones, no smartphones, no texting. So I would log on to ESPN.com just for a minute to update the list, and then I'd disconnect from the internet to see if my name was called. And I was sitting there for 2 days. It was, at that time, draft was Saturday and a Sunday. All day Saturday, my name doesn't get called. I was like, okay. Sunday, I'm updating. Finally, on round 7, I get a call. Tom Coughlin. "Hey, Chevrier." I was like, "Yes, sir." He's like, "This is Tom Coughlin. You ready to be a Jacksonville Jaguar?" No, he says, first question, he's like, "Are you healthy?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm healthy." He's like, "Okay, are you ready to be a Jacksonville Jaguar?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Okay, we're picking you next." I was like, "Okay, what do I got to do?" He's like, "Nothing. Someone's going to call you, and they're going to give you flight information for minicamp." I was like, "Oh, okay, this is it. Hey, hooray." So next thing you know, it's a Sunday. Wednesday, I'm in Jacksonville. I'm so excited. Right? Like, this is like the culmination of my dream. I mean, I'm looking back the year before, the stabbing, everything, the East-West Fronting, the workouts, like everything. Like, I'm like, wow, I did it. And we sit in this big auditorium. Like, the whole team's there. It's hot. It's like 110 degrees in Jacksonville Fahrenheit. I don't even know what that is Celsius. Probably like almost 40. We're sitting there, and Coughlin was he was like known as the meanest coach in the NFL. So he gave a quick welcome speech, and right away turns it over to the special teams coach. His name was Frank Gans. If you look him up, crazy story. But he's no longer with us. But yeah, crazy story about this man. But he's very animated, and they called him Crash, and he was like a former. He said he was a former military guy, and he comes to the room. He's like, "Welcome to the NFL, gentlemen. From this day forward, we're trying to replace you." I was like, "Whoa." That's the first speech. That's the only thing I remember from the first day was, "Welcome to the NFL. From this day forward, we're trying to replace you." And it goes right to Sheldon's point. He's like, "You make it. You're not sticking around if you're stuck in that moment where, hey, I made it." And I didn't have the NFL career that I wish I would have had. I got cut after training camp with Jacksonville, spent 8 games with the Cowboys, got cut midway through the season, which is probably the most humbling and maybe I'll say shameful thing that an athlete can go through is being cut in the middle of the season when everyone knows. Like you get cut from the Dallas Cowboys, it's written about everywhere. And then go to the Bengals, played a few games there, went to Europe, and I never really got that NFL career off the ground. And it was like, it was tough. Like it was, it's not how I wanted it to go. I was hoping to play 3-4 years. Everyone always asks me that question, "Hey, you got a pension?" It's like, you got to last 3 years and 4 games to get the pension. I played 13 games. Now, it was awesome. Yeah. Every time I got cut, I was like, wow, like I still understand that the year before I was lying in a pool of blood. And here I am getting released by the Cowboys, signing with the Bengals, playing in Europe. That was all amazing because I saw it as a perspective of in the grand scheme of life. But as far as like the competitor in me, the athlete, I was disappointed. I still look back at that NFL time in my life. I said, gosh, like I could say I played in the NFL, but to anyone that really played, be like, who is this guy? So there's a little bit of that, but I know that it's still pretty special. But at the same time, I turned that around and I learned from that because, all those things and those obstacles, I still managed to turn it into a 16-year career.
Yeah.
But you look back at these moments like that didn't go as I wanted it to go. And you can't turn back time, so you can only look at it and say, well, what did I learn from it? What did I gain from it, right? But yeah, like that was really important what Sheldon said because for all athletes, getting there is not the battle. It's getting there and then staying there and then recommitting yourself to why it was you got there in the first place or what got you there in the first place or how do you get out of there if that's not where you want to be.
Yeah.
You see it in the CFL a lot, like really amazing American players, right? Maybe they got passed over by the NFL. Maybe they just didn't get that shot. Small school guy. Come up here, it's like they're hungry, chip on their shoulder. You come to the CFL, you practice 4 hours a day. You don't have to show up for off-season workouts. It's pretty lax. Well, you see guys fall off.
Yeah.
You see guys fall off because they forgot what the hunger was. And, that same hunger you had in college where it's like, no, I can't party with the guys tonight because I gotta commit to training or whatever. Like, I wasn't any better than any of the guys I played with at McGill. In fact, I tell everyone, you can make it. I don't care if you're the worst guy, the best guy, you can make it. But what distractions do you allow along the way that prevent you from your goal? And I was, in a sense, I was lucky I lived at home. I had a really strict Italian upbringing. Like I wasn't allowed to go party all the time. So when the guys finished practice and they all went drinking at the bar, I was on the subway going home because I had to be home by 11 o'clock at night.
Watching film.
Yeah, or whatever, training and stuff. So I was lucky. My circumstance was lucky, but at the same time, I had to make choices to keep me on that path. And same with playing pro. Like, yeah, I didn't do all the things that everyone did to take advantage. So if I look back, it was tough because you had to sacrifice a lot.
Yeah.
But when you look around, those are. You talk about the guys that didn't have complete buy-in, and that's why there's such a turnstile in the locker room at parts of the year.
Yeah.
And you talk about limiting the distractions, but I always thought of it as just if you don't want it so badly, to the point that's probably not great for your mental health sometimes, right? But you just can't see anything else but that because, it's like in the old World War I, World War II, scenes where you got a bunch of army guys running, guy with a machine gun, and everybody's falling down around you. It's the guy that can keep crawling and keep crawling. Some of it's persistence, some of it's just luck. Your body holds up when other guys' bodies didn't at the right times.
But you know what, Sheldon? I'm with you in that. But also, when I look back, especially on my time on NFL, this is where I think I might be against you. But as I was so obsessive, almost too I was operating in the red all the time that I didn't take a minute to smell the roses.
Oh, no, that's interesting. I think you have to take a minute to smell the roses. But if you take 2 minutes to smell the roses, you're out.
Right.
So we had a similar talk about, welcome to camp. We're now trying to replace you. But Gary Chevrier was the defensive coordinator with the Roughriders my second year. And what his story was is he goes, man, like if I used to coach high school. Okay. And he says, if I ever went back there again, what I'd do and I'm okay telling another long story? Or?
Yeah, please. That's what we're here for.
He said, man, if I were coaching in high school, I'd have every player on the team wearing the number of games that they have left in their career on their helmet. Because you know how many games you have left. If you're a freshman, you got 44. If you're a sophomore, you got... but then as your career is winding down, some of the guys in that locker room with you are going 5, 4,
internal clock,
3, right? And just know how meaningful every game that you play is, and never lose track. The young guys have to stay just as focused to help the old guys win, and the old guys have to train up and teach the young guys so that to ensure their chance at a championship. Mm-hmm. He says, now, I don't coach high school, I coach pros. I coach you guys. He goes, so let me ask you guys, what number do you think you have on your helmet right now? He's probably a 2.
Wow.
He says if you're our star middle linebacker from last year, you're probably in a 3 to a 5. You've got 3 games where if you're not at your best and then you're slipping, that we're going to work with you. Mm-hmm. But he goes, I'm not even sure I can say you got a 5. And he goes, so you guys, we all need each other. My job depends on you guys. Your job depends on me. But we've all got to buy in, and we all have to play the system properly. There's no lapses, there's no room for lapses, or changes are going to have to be made. And they're not personal, but just so you guys understand, this is what it means to be a pro.
It's part of the business, right?
Part of the business.
It's one of the interesting parts is like CFL, you brought up XFL, Vince McMahon. Like, how amazing are CFL fans? Because I think that's one distinction that people watching this, 10 times the amount of population are going to be from the US. They're going to see this, they're like, oh, what is the CFL? It's like Canada's league, and I've heard you guys talk about it, like people don't get their cup filled from any other sport unless it's CFL football. Can each of you maybe touch on what that CFL means to you?
To me personally, it's there's a lot of pride. Obviously I spent the majority of my adult life playing in that league. I got to travel across Canada and see our great country because of the league. The fans are so passionate, the trophy is the oldest trophy, sport trophy in North America.
That you've won 3 times.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure it's there.
Now you're just rubbing that in, because I don't have one.
But
I'll rub it in there.
But Toronto Argonauts are the oldest professional sports franchise in North America. There's a lot of rich history there that people don't understand about this game. Sheldon and I, we talked on one of our podcasts about, this year in the Super Bowl, they made a big deal, and rightfully so, about the first time 2 black quarterbacks facing off in a Super Bowl. The CFL has historically been the league where African-American quarterbacks, and not just African-American quarterbacks, but people that haven't been given a fair shake in the NFL have had an opportunity to come up and shine.
Diversity.
People from smaller schools that have been given an opportunity to be stars.
Mm-hmm. Doug Flutie's, people of shorter status.
Jeff Garcia's, all these guys have come up, and the fans embrace them. It's a community league. Like when an American player, for instance, comes to the CFL and invests in the community invests in them. You see it across the league. Mm-hmm. Obviously, in Saskatchewan, Sheldon can touch on that, which he has already, is the Rider fans. They are like the most diehard fans you can find in any NFL city. But across the league, it's like that. The Grey Cup is not a corporate event. It's a fan event. There are friendships that people have forged having met at a Grey Cup 10, 15 years ago, and that's their family vacation every year. Like, to go meet the friends that they met through the Grey Cup. And, that's what I love about the CFL and the fans. Now, we don't have the same population base as the US, and hockey is king in Canada. But gosh, it's so special. Yeah. And, we have different rules. I don't even think it has to do with the rules or the game we have Canadian players playing in the CFL that are being given an opportunity to play at a high level and showing that they can play at that high level. I think that's amazing. We have the fans that have better access than they've ever had to NFL players. You know, CFL fans, you'll find them because, again, the makeup of the league, they'll be working in your communities. Like, we had a Hall of Fame running back here, John Cornish, was also a bank teller down the street. And you got, like, guys coming up to me, hey, Chevy, Cornish works at my bank. I'm like, yeah, like, and so we're part of the fabric of the community. And that's the real charm of the CFL and its relationship with the fans. That also is a little bit of its Achilles heel in terms of growth. And I don't know what the answer is there, but I wish more American fans would say, hey, give it a chance, because you know what? There are some of their former college star players from small towns playing up here and thriving, right?
Yeah. Even a guy like Johnny Manziel showed up for a bit, right?
Yeah.
Obviously didn't have the result that he was looking for, but like that was Heisman Trophy, like, you know, right there. And I see opportunities, like I just see so much of professional sport as positives, what comes from it. And I wish the CFL got the same kind of recognition that the NFL does. Doesn't have the same mind, money, business that's behind it, the engine that's running. But you experienced NCAA down in Iowa, like you said, 90,000 fans. That's probably got to be something completely different as well. Like, what was it like crossing the 49th parallel, getting your education down there, and then coming back, like full circle experience?
Well, it was actually really cool, and much like you know, one of the things that really sunk in with me with what you're saying is that you get this mindset early on. For me, Ruben Mays, and you guys probably don't remember him, but in 1986 he was drafted to the New Orleans Saints, was Rookie of the Year in the NFL, led the league in rushing. He's from my town.
Okay.
And you know, so in my mind, well, shit, if Ruben can do it, I can do it too, right? Not realizing, a little naive, how hard it was. But just to get down there and to get the opportunity when there wasn't a lot of Canadians going down to the major NCAA programs, it was really cool. I mean, but then you got to go through that whole mindset as a Canadian. Like, you know, when you know, yeah, we're the greatest hockey country on earth, but we don't think of ourselves as the greatest football country.
Right.
And so I was so nervous going down there, like just, you know, almost panic attacks.
Imposter syndrome.
Exactly. I was so excited, but I was like, I had these dreams of just getting pummeled. Yeah. And I was like, no, you know what, we're going to do it. And you know what, I really quickly realized, same thing. I had to learn a bit of a different game. I had to learn some different terminology. Football's football. Want to, technique's technique. And if you know, so it was really exciting just to say that, hey, a Canadian can, you know, play in any league. If you can conceive it in your mind and train your body to do what you need it to do, you can get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a neat experience.
And that's pretty neat that you bring that up, because we've talked about this, where it's like we played with enough really amazing Canadian athletes that have come out of the CIS. So for many Canadian athletes, that ceiling has been put, well, maybe you can make it to the CFL, right?
Right.
I didn't buy into that when I was in the CIS, because I saw my buddy playing in the NFL right next to me that I train with every summer. I'm like, he's playing in the NFL. I can do it. I just got to get known. Whereas a lot of Canadians, they don't see that success right in front of their eyes. So they're like, well, the highest achievement I can make it is to the NFL, or to the CFL, excuse me. And then they play and they have a good career. And I remember having talks with guys. I'm like, you're a quality contributor on a CFL team. Doesn't matter that you're a Canadian. Doesn't matter how it got you. You compete with guys that played in the NCAA. You compete with guys that are getting looks in the NFL in the offseason. Why can't you go? And a lot of guys don't have an answer for that. And I'm like, Bill Belichick, for instance, New England Patriots, he's notorious for grabbing some 2 or 3 guys out of Division III schools. A guy that played lacrosse, was an NCAA champ lacrosse player. Hogan, I think, was his last name.
Chris Hogan?
Chris Hogan, yeah. He was playing for the Patriots as a starting receiver, or Danny Whitehead.
Yeah.
I think he was a D3 running back. And I'm looking at guys, I'm like, he's 5'5", he runs a 4.4. You're 5'5", you run a 4.4. You run downfield, you bust your head to make a tackle on special teams. Why couldn't you do that for the Patriots? You do it 10 times a game for the Stamps, and in the NFL, it's maybe 6 times a game, and they fair catch the balls. I'm like, you don't think you could do that?
And Belichick's looking for those guys.
Right.
Yeah.
But guys don't believe it. And they said, well, my ceiling was the CFL. This I made it. And they don't challenge themselves to look at, well, can I make it further? Because they've been told, yeah, this is about the highest you can achieve. And there was a discussion with Nathan Rourke when he signed with Jacksonville saying, I never dreamt of being in the CFL. My dream is the NFL. The CFL was a stop along the way, and a lot of people give him flack for that. And it's like, why? Like, there's a defensive tackle. I just read it on the way here. I can't remember. It's a really long, hard to pronounce name. Manitoba product. I don't think he ever played for the university, for the CFL. He just signed a $35 million deal with the Atlanta Falcons. He was with New Orleans for the last 4 years.
Okay.
He got drafted out of U of M. I can't remember. Just signed a $35 million deal, $24 million guaranteed from the University of Manitoba, defensive tackle. You're telling me that kids can't dream of that? And the CFL, we talk about the CFL kind of being that step along the way. Well, I don't see a problem with that. If we could develop guys to be that.
This was after my career, a couple years after, but I was telling my story to a business, and the guy after was like, "Wow, what a great story!" And you know, to think you just started with the cold call to the Riders. Is there any other thing that you wish you would have done? And I'm like, yeah, I wish I would have called the Broncos.
Yes, right.
Like honestly, you just got to be persistent and put yourself in those opportunities. You're going to get told no a lot, and you're going to get cut a lot. You're going to have to find that mental resilience to battle, because it is a battle, right? It's our stories worked out more or less. Some guys with stories worked out way better, and some guys, you know, stories ended before they got started. But
David Onyemata. See, I couldn't pronounce his name. I was reading on Twitter just before I came here. I was waiting for my kids at their dentist appointment. I was like, wow, like this guy, U of M.
Yeah.
Like, it's not far from where anyone's growing up here, and now they could see it, right?
Yeah. Well, and you guys both bring up being naive at certain points of your life, which is interesting, because 3.5 years ago, I was naive starting this podcast, talking with professional athletes like yourself. I'm like, I can do this. Why the heck not? No one else is doing it.
You know what's funny about that too? Like, it was just sitting to guys that played sports and all that stuff. It's the same thing. Like, the first thing I mentioned to you guys when I got to meet you guys here. So you guys are actually traveling around. I've seen you in Florida. I've seen you do all. That's amazing, right? And it's just a matter of setting your mind to it, and not letting distracted and not taking some setbacks. Because I'm sure you've had some nights where you're wondering, what the imposter syndrome? What the heck am I doing?
I think it comes back, you guys have both mentioned it, it's the persistence, it's the consistency. I attribute it, like, working a sales job, you learn hearing no a lot, you get comfortable with it. I've had hundreds of athletes say no to coming on, or just not replying, whatever it is. You don't draw bogged down. Like, our goal is to educate, entertain, inspire. I started this because, you know, I didn't have access to conversations like this on a daily basis to be able to read through, listen to, from incredible athletes from around the world.
Nobody ever called me an incredible athlete.
Well, now you've been incredible. I'm rubbing it in there now. Come on. You are, though. You played in the CFL. You spent a considerable amount of time representing, putting on that jersey. Like, whether you won a Grey Cup or not, there's many people around the world that weren't able to win those like prestigious trophies at the end of the day, and we're still incredible potential Hall of Famers, right? Like, at the end of the day, what's cool about this is the fact that you've been able to build something over time. You took the fact that you were naive, stupid, whatever adjective you want to use when you're young, and you just keep working at it, right? And people don't recognize, and I think like that, I wanted to hit home on that point you brought up. Like, any athlete, any kid, any student going through, if you set your mind to something, you can probably achieve it. Whether you will or not is another question, honestly, but if you set your mind to something, you can do it. You might have to drive 2.5 hours through cold, stormy weather, knock on guys' doors, hear no twice.
Dial up internet, follow the draft, take a call from Tom Coughlin.
There's no Instagram live of you with your family going around there, I'm sure, right?
Yeah, it was like the door was shut and I said, stay out.
Yeah.
Like, but yeah, you know, it is that. And, you know, I've coached, you know, I have 3 boys and I've coached community football. And the hardest thing for me has been coaching sport like football, where we don't have the numbers in Canada and you have to cut. Because every year when I will cut athletes or have that discussion with coaches, who do we cut? I know the guys that I'm cutting are me. The guy that was on the swim team that, you know, hey coach, how do we do this? You know, like, I don't know how to play football. Those are the guys we're cutting. But I was one of those guys. I was one of those guys that they would have cut in the first SWAT. And yet, here I am, the guy that nobody thought would make it. You know, every guy that I went on every team with before I got into professional ranks was better than me. Even the worst guy on the team was better than me. I was 18 years old. I didn't even know how to put my pads in my pants. Like, that was weird.
Yeah.
And I show up and I have another 18-year-old man and I'm asking him, can you help me put my pads in my pants? That was my first day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you can get through the first day and then get to the second day and the third day and just keep building every day and not letting those things that get you down about what you don't have and just work on what you can and not giving up and not worrying about what anyone else has to say, you can do it. And I have a hard time cutting kids because I know that they just have to get through their first day.
Yeah.
They can get through their first day, we can get them to a second. And that's the tough part.
It's perspective, like you brought up earlier, though, right? And I think you actually might be doing them a favor. And hear me out on this, because that getting cut, like I remember distinctly every time I got cut, and it happened frequently in hockey. And like, hey, I attribute that to where we are today. At the end of the day, like I probably wouldn't have the same work ethic if I wasn't hit with that adversity constantly at a younger age and dealing with rejection and dealing with, oh, you're not going to be good enough. Like, you guys have both experienced it. You're here where you are today because of it. I think there's merit in being cut. Yep. And I think as long as you're able to caveat that, hey guys, you're not on the team this year, but keep my number.
Yeah.
And like
exactly.
follow up.
Cut with respect and make sure you're open there for them. But that brings it back to also now the next step in the equation, which is parents.
Yeah.
If you don't mind me changing
please,
gears a little bit.
you guys are both, I love this part. This is what we want.
So any guy that gets cut, what's your first call? It's your mom, right? And I know we're going to be, obviously could be mom and dad or, kids here, probably some of these are younger kids. But the number one thing that a parent can do is honestly support. Support, embrace, get them to practice on time, make sure they're learning the accountability, make sure they're not big timing a team. I've got, a sore toe, so I'm not going to go to practice today. Just support them in good habits. But what a parent will never be able to do is to do the training or the desire for them.
Yeah.
Because I don't care how good you are. Because, and again, it's the same thing. Nobody called me a great athlete. I learned technique, right? I learned technique, and that was my path to the pros. Is you grading out at a high level each game and being dependable. I was never I was the sack leader a few times, but
no big deal.
I never led the league in sacks, right?
Well, we got the sack title.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
2005.
Yeah, we did, and I was the leading sack. Maxie, I think, stole an extra one from me that year. But a kid's it's going to have to be your own desire to go. But as you know, it's not going to be like, if I work hard enough and I'm talented enough, I'm just going to get noticed and make it to the pros. Every kid is going to come across all this adversity. And the number one thing, again, that a parent can do is just be there, support them, keep them humble and grounded, and make sure that they're doing the little things right on a daily basis.
Yeah, consistency compounds.
And I think I would add this, is that there is a prescription on how to make it. Like, there's a prescription in the NHL, in Canada, you come from the dub, right?
Yeah.
And so to get to the dub, you got to go through the Bantam draft. But I want to also give some space to the outliers, the ones that don't come the traditional path, that don't get drafted to the dub, that don't go to the dub. Like, I know there are stories of people that have made it. My friend Matthew Darsh, he's the assistant general manager of the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Okay.
He played football and hockey at McGill with me. And then he quit football to continue in hockey. His brother was the one that actually played with the Seahawks, so terrible family, right? A tough problem for the parents. But he played 5 years of hockey with McGill Redmond at the time. And when he left, he signed a free agent deal with Edmonton, never made it to the big club, spent time in the AHL. Then he went to play in Europe. Long story short, his old McGill coach wound up coaching him in, I think it's the Spengler Cup in Europe, and then he wound up with the Hamilton Bulldogs. And basically at the age of 34, he made his debut with the Montreal Canadiens.
Wow.
He didn't go that traditional route. And he played 2 or 3 years. He was the same year call-up as PK Subban, played a couple of years, then he retired. He went into work in business in Montreal, and eventually one of his old teammates from the AHL circuit, maybe one of his first years when he tried out with the Tampa Farm Club, is the general manager of the Lightning and hires him on. He's got 2 Stanley Cup rings, right?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of space for people that believe, because there's a lot of people, even parents, that say, well, my kid didn't get drafted in the Bantam draft, he's never going to make it. And that's not true. your kid's got to want it. Like Sheldon said, like my parents weren't a sport family. I was an immigrant mom. Dad worked real hard. We didn't have a lot. My parents didn't drive me to all my practices. My parents didn't even watch my games. But when I decided that football was the thing that turned me on, I didn't need my parents. I got up at 5 a.m. to take the subway to McGill to run with the track team in the morning in February at minus 25. Like, this is not the old stories of crossing through the snow, but it literally is, right? And at some point, your desire, okay, has to be unbeatable. Your drive for what you want has to be such that you are making it. Whether you think you're going to make it or not, you got to put everything into it. And that's what I did. And there's space for people that someone's going to say, hey, Chev, if you don't go to NCAA, you're never going to make it. Because I remember I signed with McGill, and all these guys going to Michigan. I mean, I went to Vanier College, produced Tim Biakabatuka, who was like a huge star in the NFL, Michigan. Guys going to Michigan, Virginia, all these big schools, Miami. The dream from CEGEP was to go to NCAA. I'm like, well, I'm going to go to McGill. And they're like, Chev, you're going to blow it. I'm like, I remember, I will make it no matter where I go. And that naivete to the system that everyone grew up because, well, if you don't go to NCAA, you're not making it. I made it, right? Yeah. And I have a ton of space for that dreamer and that believer. But you've got to do it. You can't, Sheldon can't dream it for me. David can't dream it for me. I've got to dream it, and then I've got to put in the work. And that's sport, that's life, that's everything we do, right? Yeah. You've got to believe it, and I have space for that because it's easy to go it's not easy to go the traditional path, but you look at Mark Giordano. Mark Giordano, man, he left the Calgary Flames to go play in the KHL to prove that he was worth more than being a sixth defenseman. He was a captain of the Flames, and he's still now. Is he the captain of the Leafs?
No, he's not captain, but he's like a vital member of their decor, signing for like a league minimum so that they can afford to pay for other guys. Guys like that, like.
I love those guys.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of, you say what's good about the CFL? It's full of those guys. Yeah. Every year there's a guy like that. You'd be like, wow, where'd this guy come from, right? You see those guys because they're not taking the typical path.
I got to ask, what was it like having Guy Lafleur drop the puck at your midget hockey tournament?
Man, it was so cool. Yeah, like, so I have two stories from when I played hockey. Man, how'd you find out about that?
You got to do the deep dive, man.
Jeez, I want to know where that is because I didn't even. This is the funniest story. So Guy Lafleur went to the Guy Lafleur Invitational Tournament as a midget team. Man, I can't believe you brought that up. So I was a D man, and that was really cool. But the most memorable part about this tournament was this. My center takes the face off. He's like, listen, I say, you take the face off, drop it back to me. We're on the power play. Go to the net, cause some traffic, and I'm going to shoot it. So he does that. Wins the face off. He skates to the front of it. I blast the slap shot. Now, I didn't really have accuracy. I hit him in the back of the head and knocked my teammate out. So what was more memorable was Guy Lafleur coming on the ice because they had to call out the paramedics and stuff to check on him because the kid was out before he even landed. And Guy Lafleur's like, hey, you got to control this slap shot, kid. So, yeah, that was a funny moment. And there was another funny moment. I was kind of a goon when I played hockey because I wasn't very good, so I had to do something. Yeah. And I remember playing in the old Montreal Forum. The Montreal Forum was amazing. I got to play on the Montreal Forum ice. I get a penalty, and I go in the penalty box, and the announcer, he was at that time, Claude something, was the old announcer for the historic guy. He was announcing our games. He's like, hey, Chevrier, we heard about you. So yeah, I had a couple of memories from playing hockey, but that was about it. My hockey career was, I play more ball hockey than ice hockey now, but yeah, I did enjoy playing hockey growing up, but my dream of being a goalie for the Montreal Canadiens was never going to happen, considering I had two left feet and I tripped over the blue line every time I did the pivot. So
yeah, my dream for playing goalie for the Montreal Canadiens shattered when I didn't make the Bantam draft. No, I'm kidding. But
how about being Canada's #1 pickleball player?
Dude, that could be a thing. Yeah. For sure could be a thing. Ben Johns, we had him on the show, who's like the world's #1. We're working on getting Annalie Waters, who's the female #1. But I think it's possible. Yeah. Have you guys been playing pickleball?
I love pickleball.
I've been learning a little bit about it. I haven't played it. Have you played it?
Yeah, so I'm a firefighter, right? Yeah. And in the fire halls, we always keep active and stuff. And depending on what fire hall you're in, some guys just love pickleball. So there was a point where I was playing pickleball like every day, to the point where I had the tendonitis and stuff. And man, it's an awesome sport. I love it.
Yeah.
Interesting story. You might look this guy up. Former CFL athlete. He played with me in Calgary. He was Montreal Alouettes. Mike Botterill. You remember this name?
Yeah, I know the
name. Where is
Yeah.
So he was a McMaster grad. Played with the Owls. Played with the Stamps for a little bit. I believe he's out in Kelowna, and he started a pickleball thing, and he's got his own line of rackets, his own line of rackets. But he's into it pretty big, and it's a fun sport. Like, I love it.
That's where we're heading tonight, back home. So we'll go hit up Mike while we're there. And
yeah, he was during COVID. I remember he was pretty active on Instagram. I haven't seen him. Maybe it's the algorithm that hasn't fed me his stuff. But he had this during COVID. He was doing ice pickleball, like in skates on frozen lakes with his buddies and stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, Mike Botterill, you got to look him up because pickleball's fun.
Yeah, we spent last night at the Flames game watching at the Saddle Dome. First time there, small seats. Other than that, good experience.
Yeah.
For you guys, settled down here in Calgary, I know 1999 bobsleigh trip, that was what brought you initially to Calgary.
Yeah.
Like, what hooked you guys in each to this city?
You go first.
Oh, geez, Calgary is just an amazing city. Since that being in business and in real estate, there's definitely Calgary's got its ups and its downs, right? But when you come to Calgary, it's such a fresh, young, exciting city. I mean, you've got people from all over Canada, North America, and the world. In the early days, it had such a entrepreneurial spirit. You just felt the energy within the city. So you're just meeting tons of great people. Everybody's from somewhere else. Yeah. You can tell that the local Calgarians are a little bit annoyed at how we've taken over their city, right? But it's just a dynamic city that's got a little something for everybody. We've major airport to get off anywhere in the world you want to. We've got the mountains as our backyard. Yeah. I'm big into camping. Yeah. We just crossed the mountains into BC for spend weeks at a time in the summertime. Okay. It's just the gateway to everything and amazing people.
Yeah. Where was your favorite place to play that football brought you?
Oh boy. Well, outside of college, because college,
college.
College you got to play in some pretty cool stadiums, but college was literally you get off, your bus to your plane, you walk 20 yards from your plane to your jet, or from your bus to your jet. You get escorted to the hotel. You don't see anything, right? But for me, I always loved Montreal. Was always my favorite trip. It's an amazing city. The customer service out of that it's just like being in New York, except the French Canadian twist. Yeah. Vancouver's an awesome city. I hear Hamilton's nice this time of year. But yeah, I think I enjoyed almost every place that I went to. But yeah, Montreal and Vancouver were probably my favorite trips.
Okay. Okay, 99 bobsled. What happened?
So I was going into my fourth year at McGill. And I was interested. I got identified at there was a scouting camp. Again, I told you I was running with the track team and stuff, and our track coach had done some bobsled. He said, you should go check it out. So I went to Ottawa, did an identification camp out there, did really well, performed well. My numbers were all good. And they flew me out here to do a few runs. And that was my first time out west. It had been my first time in an airplane since I was 13 years old. So I hadn't been in an airplane until I went in 99. I was 23, maybe 22, 23, and come to Calgary, and it was amazing. Like, the facilities, Calgary wasn't as big as it is now, but yeah, that COP, Winsport, what an amazing facility, like, for training. And at that time, I was so into training, I was so into fitness and getting to my peak potential. And then you get around these bobsled athletes, and it was really cool. And going down on the sled, I remember it was quite a trip. I did 4 runs, and I remember in the afternoon we did the 2-man. In the morning we did the 4-man. In the afternoon we did the 2-man, and I had to pull the brakes, and I almost forgot to pull the brakes because I had my head down the whole time. And I remember that the pilot was headbutting me to get it out. But I did 4 runs. The first 3 were fine, and the third one I almost pooped myself. It was that many G-force. I don't know why. Yeah. But yeah, it was awesome. It was such an awesome experience. And we left it at, I was going back to university, and they said I was 260 pounds.
Okay.
They wanted me to lose 40 pounds. And I was like, well, I need to be at least another 20 pounds heavier for football, and I was focused on football. So I kind of set it aside till after my football career.
Okay.
And like I said, that was going into my 4th year. I still hadn't set my sights on this big, I hadn't even set my sights on the NFL at that point. And so I thought, yeah, maybe I could resume it. I mean, the average football career lasts maybe 3 years. So I thought, you know what, be in your peak power output phase at about my 30s. I said, yeah, maybe I'll come back. But, I wound up playing football till I was 40, right? So.
Yeah. Your Wikipedia bio still says you're presently playing, so.
Well, I did sign a couple of years back.
I know, I was going to bring it up.
But Calgary has always been a special place. I came here and I fell in love right away. I think it was because they brought us for a steak the first day. I was like, I had never tasted.
Here?
Yeah, not at Nick's.
Oh.
So when I came with the bobsled, it was somewhere downtown.
Okay.
But there is a tie to Nick's. Then I came back 2 years later when I was nominated for the Athlete of the Year in Canada. They do I think they were called the Howard Mackey Awards here, and that's where I met Doug Mitchell, who was the commissioner of the CFL. He was one of the owners of the Stamps. And I met him and his family. They put on this fantastic awards for all the Canadian athletes. So came here, it was awesome, fell in love with it. And then, my career went, as we said, I played 2 years in Edmonton, had a blast there. The head coach there was Tom Higgins. I loved his coaching style. It was something that I felt like I could get behind this guy. I saw some real tough asses in the NFL. I was like, Tom was a different cat, and we won a Grey Cup with him. And so when I came back to the CFL in 2005 after an unsuccessful tryout with the Jets, he was now the GM head coach here, and he asked if I wanted to come and join him and help build what we had in Edmonton, build it here. And I thought, yeah, I'll come and meet him. And the first place I ate when I signed with the Stampeders was here at Nick's.
Best steak I've had in a long time.
So you did eat the steak.
I ate the steak and Greek salad. You told me I ate it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so this is the first restaurant I ate when I decided that I was moving to Calgary. And it's pretty cool that we're here and talking about that, because Sheldon and I, we've had some great meals here. We've had a few shows here over the days, and
it hasn't changed a bit.
It hasn't changed a bit.
This is one of the just the legendary staples of Calgary. You got to come in if you come in for a game day. Come in anytime. I mean, they've got original signed posters that have been on the wall since 1979 when they opened.
But yeah, this was the first place, and I'm so happy I live in Calgary, because it's been a great place to raise my kids.
Yeah.
I go back to Montreal. Montreal's such a big city now, and it's like, I can't imagine being stuck in traffic at night, having to drive 3 kids to hockey practice. I couldn't imagine being stuck in traffic for like an hour and a half to get to the rink. Calgary, like I mentioned off air, it's a big town. You can still get around. You can go from top to bottom in about a half hour. Obviously rush hour, but it's a great city. Like Sheldon said, there's so many opportunities. It's a healthy, vibrant city. Sure, the economy's a little down now, but it's cyclical here. It happened before, and it goes up and down. But yeah, I love being out here. I'm glad to call this my home. I've almost been here now longer than I've been in Montreal. Not yet, but
close.
Pretty close. And it's a great spot. And there's great people here, and a lot of great memories over the years, whether it's in sport or out of sport. And
30 seconds. How was Europe?
Europe was awesome. I had been to Europe when I was a kid, and I got an opportunity to see the world because of football. Played 3 teams. Went to Dusseldorf, Frankfurt. Went to Berlin, Scotland. Lived in Barcelona on the beach. It was an amazing. To be able to get paid to do that, we didn't get paid very much, but I lived on the beach and I played football, and it was amazing. I did that for about 3 months, and gosh, I remember saying, "Oh, I could make that a career for sure."
Yeah, I have buddies playing basketball overseas, hockey overseas, and like they love it. They live for it. I want to touch on life after sport and the transition, because you took that by the neck and ran with it, but. 2014 Grey Cup. You didn't even play in it, but you said it was your most memorable.
Yeah. So I don't think any athlete ever trains to be on the bench. And I had a couple of experiences prior to that year where I was asked to take a different role. And the first time it happened, I took it pretty personally, and I didn't know how to handle it. It brought me to some places that I didn't want to be, not just as an athlete, but as a human. I was not in a good spot, and I didn't handle it well. And then it happened again, and a few years later, where I was asked to take a kind of a secondary role and not play much. And I learned a lot in that experience about becoming a pro athlete and being ready for when you're called upon. And so 2014, I had played 3 games, and then I had been asked to basically be an insurance policy. Long story short, I played 3 games, and then the coaching staff said, listen, we want to play with our roster. We want to put another guy into long snap. We want to keep you around. And really, in that moment, learning from a couple of the past years, I had 2 choices. I knew I was still at the top of my game and probably the best in my craft, but the team had a different need for me, and I could have chosen to take it negatively, be negative, and be like, I've played so long, like, why are they messing with me, all this stuff. But really, I chose a different attitude. I chose to be positive. I decided that I was going to be a leader. I decided I was going to support even the person that has my job. And this guy, Tim St. Pierre, wound up being, he's a great friend of mine. He was my other roommate on the road, almost after Sheldon. I've had 3 roommates on the road in my time in Calgary: Sheldon, Rob Lazio, and Tim St. Pierre. That's the only guys I've ever had on the road. So Tim and I became great friends, even though he took my job. Yeah. And even though I felt like I should be playing my job. And you're not an athlete if you don't think that. Mm-hmm. You're not an athlete if you don't think you should be playing above the guy that's above you or that takes your spot, whether he's your buddy or not. And so I just said, well, I can't control that aspect of it. I can't control the coach's decision, but I can control everything else. And so I controlled, getting in, watching film, helping the guys, training after practice. Now, I had played 100 years by that point. I had 3 kids waiting for me, at home to play every day. I could have easily gotten off the field at 1:30 in the afternoon and ripped home and hang out with my boys, but I stayed, I trained, I watched film. I did all the extra stuff that I would have done whether I was a player or not. And I always said, being a professional athlete, I'm not defined as a pro because I get to play on Sunday. That's not what defines me as a pro. Mm-hmm. What defines me as a pro is how I comport myself every day in practice as a member of the team, as someone that the guys look up to, as someone that's achieving a championship. That's all those things. It has nothing to do with me playing on Sunday. Yeah. I'm not going to hang my head because I'm not getting to wear the jersey and rah-rah on the sidelines or hit someone. I'm a pro athlete 7 days a week, whether I play or not. And I went with that mentality, and I did everything I could, both on the field, in the film room, in the training room, in the community. I did a bunch of community, and it was really that year where I just put everything besides myself first. And when we raised that trophy, like you said, I didn't play in that game. I was on the sideline. I was watching. I was cheering the guys on. I was more excited than anyone there. And when the trophy went up and I got on the field, I have the best picture at home with all the guys holding my kids up. I was holding one of my kids, and the guys are holding my kids up, and the trophy's up in the air, and the confetti's coming down. And man, my kid is looking up, and he's looking at the confetti. Yeah. He doesn't even care about the trophy, right? But for me, that moment is like, that's what it's about. Because it doesn't matter if I played all 18 games of the season. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. What mattered was being able to be in that moment with my 3 boys, and I know that I contributed there. Because there were guys that needed counseling. There was guys that needed help. There was guys that were playing through injury. And as Sheldon said, guys going through that number in the head, they know that
you're a valuable member on that team.
Not only that. I mean, the whole, a game's a game, season's a season, a career's a career. It's who you look back on, because there's a lot of people that I've seen in that situation that turn sour, and you got to cut the cancer out of a locker room real fast because it just drains on everyone. I don't know how I would handle that, because that's hard. That's hard, not sure.
But I'm going to tell you this. So that was like, that story for me was, that season was powerful for me because I learned so much about me as a human being and a leader. Yeah. And that transcends the locker room. But I'll tell you this, in terms of football, what it did for me. I remember, Sheldon knows, the guys used to call me Mr. Football. Okay. And I don't think it was a term of endearment. It's because I always went.
It was because Sunday morning after the 4-hour flight back from Toronto, when everybody's sore and we're doing the wind sprints, Chevy's up there leading. When he talks about running with the track team, he's not kidding. Hated that guy.
But you don't even know the story. Why? One day we'll talk about on our show why that's such a crucial thing for me. But just say, I knew that guys called me Mr. Football, and I knew it wasn't a term of endearment. But when I did scout team, even I was 38 years old, I went all out because I was preparing the team. My introduction to football was actually watching Rudy. That's how I thought I could do this, right? And so when I was there, even as a 38-year-old running scout team, when guys would be just like, get a young guy to do it, I was out there. And I tore my knee, my meniscus, on day 3 prepping for the Grey Cup. I wasn't going to play in the game, but I tore my meniscus. I'm 38 years old. I just finished sitting on the bench for an entire year. I tore my meniscus. Okay, and I have to have surgery in the off season after the Grey Cup. The phone's ringing. This is after we win the Grey Cup. All the reports. So Chevy, you're going to hang it up? You're going to hang it up? You're going to retire? And I said, I don't know. I said, I'm still under contract. And if I'm under contract, I'm coming in and I'm coming to compete.
Like, and I got a Roger year in me for sure.
Yeah, I still have a Roger year in me. But so I had surgery after that Grey Cup to repair my meniscus. And they brought me back the next year. And they brought 5 other guys to compete for that snapping job. And I come in, 38-year-old guy, or 39 at that point, torn knee, having sat on the bench the full year before. I come in 2015. And with, the long story short, as I always say, I won the job again.
Yeah.
And I started that season. If I did not choose that attitude in 2014, if I was that cancer in the locker room, if I wasn't fully invested in what we're doing, I never would have got called back in 2015 and had one more ride. I never would have had that. And I wasn't doing it so that maybe they bring me back next year, because I was living in the moment. Yeah. And I had to make a choice in the moment. But I know that time is not linear. Like, I believe this. Time is not linear. Something you do now might affect 10 years from now and you don't even know it. But if you don't do it now, that 10-year point from now, you won't get that opportunity. If I didn't choose that in 2014, guess who wouldn't have been called back in 2021 when the Calgary Stampeders needed someone because of COVID? Mm-hmm. And they're like, man, we need a guy. And we can't fly anyone in because they have to be five days in quarantine.
Mm-hmm. You were ready.
2014, if that wasn't me, I never would have got a call as a 45 to get back in and say, you know what, maybe I got one more shot at me. Maybe I get my Roger.
The guy was still putting up 4 reps at 325 on the Instagram after being called out by his firefighter buddies.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
Yep. I couldn't believe it. Nasty, how'd you deal with this guy, man?
Oh boy, you know what? So as you might see, I'm a little bit more of the reserve. I just let this guy talk all the time. The whole reason we had a show is I think we were in Edmonton during the CBC strike when they were covering it, and so there's no broadcasters going. And he's like, "Hey, Shell, hey, let's do the commentation." I'm like, "Chevy, go to bed." And next thing, he's got fake mics going back and forth.
I think they were bananas.
Nice.
They were bananas.
Were they really? Oh,
yeah, remember we used to get bananas at night? We get cookies.
Yeah,
and
that's
bananas?
right. Yeah, that's
Spatulas
right. Yeah.
out,
No, I think you're right. Yeah.
It was bananas.
So yeah, but I'll tell you, it was a lot of fun playing with Chevy, because the same thing too. And I'd learned, the guy that I ended up taking his job, the first veteran that took me under his wings. You understand that nothing's personal. You're always competing for time, things like that. But that's up to somebody else.
Yeah.
The only thing you can do is your part, and then just be the best person you can. Exchange information, and just see where the cards fold.
Because you guys were playing on the line together, right? Like, you're
we
competing
played
at points.
We were competing at points, but I mean, there's people kind of moving in and out of the lineup, but we always had a great relationship. I don't think there was ever. I was probably his biggest fan.
No, we actually, Sheldon was the first player I met when I came to Calgary. The Tim Hortons just down the road.
No way.
And the cool thing is when I got to Calgary, they played a 3-4. So 1 nose tackle, 2 defensive ends, and then 4 linebackers. And Sheldon was the Canadian nose tackle. It was a Canadian position. And for it to be a solid Canadian position, you needed a solid Canadian backup.
Because I get tired.
Yeah.
And I was perfectly happy to be the Brian Hayward to Sheldon's Patrick Waugh. I was playing a lot of special teams. So I thought for longevity and for just having fun, I wanted to have fun playing football. Sheldon and I just had such a great tandem. And again, it worked out on the field. I never once felt a negative competition with Sheldon. Like, we were there. When they drafted Miguel Robinet,
they tried to replace both of us.
They tried to replace both of us.
They tried to replace me every year. They tried to replace me.
Then we were like, and Miguel became a great friend of us. But we thought, we got this locked down. Like, we got a solid starter. We got a solid backup. We're going to be here forever. Yeah. And the next thing you know, they draft first-round draft pick out of University Laval, Miguel Robinet, that played at the Miami Hurricanes. Was like, oh God. But
before you was Tyler Lynham.
Yeah.
Their number 1 pick was always Canadian defensive tackles. But yeah, I mean, you got in there, and then you played longer in Calgary than I played my entire career. So.
But you know what? And it's true, because one of the things was I learned to reinvent myself.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to, like, the tap on the shoulder. You know what the tap is, and they say, "Hey, we know what you can do. We got a young guy that can do it." It's like, ugh. And the first time, when I referenced that I took it hard, because the guy that was going ahead of me was a guy that I was mentoring, and I was like, man, like I'm still better than him because he's still got a lot to learn. Like, give me that chance. But sometimes you don't get that chance to either transition on the way you want. But what I learned over the years is that, yeah, I can do anything. Ask me to do it. Ask me to sit on the bench. Man, I will be the best. By the end of my career, I was the best sitter on the bench you can get. You want me to drink Gatorade and cheer for the team? Man, I am going to. Everyone's going to know Chevy's got so much energy. And in a way, like, you learn to accept the role. I find in football a lot, it happens to a lot of kids, like good athletes, right? They're a defensive tackle. Yeah, I want to play defensive lineman. And then all of a sudden someone says, you know what, you're a big kid. We could use you on the O-line. And then all of a sudden they shut that. Well, I can't play O-line because O-line is not and sometimes you got to listen to the coaches. Yeah. Sometimes you got to take a role. And because I listened to the coaches, because I became primarily just a long snapper, I wanted to be a defensive tackle my whole career. I liked hitting quarterbacks. I liked all that stuff. I did it when Sheldon and I played together. By the time Sheldon left, and by 2009, they switched me to the O-line. You do not want me blocking for your star player. I'm going to promise you that. If I'm in the game, it's like, run! Yeah. But again, doing anything they asked me to do kept me in the game longer. And I had a skill. The long snapping was a skill that allowed me to play forever. And it was the reason they called me back. It wasn't because I was a great defensive tackle. It was because I could snap a football. Yeah. And so, I think that's, you got to make yourself versatile. Mm-hmm. Sheldon mentioned it, right? Back in the day, if you didn't have that second skill and you're a Canadian guy, they're like, well.
And even if you don't know how to do it in the moment, you got to be willing to say yes and work at it.
Oh, believe me, I learned it my first couple of years in Saskatchewan how to long snap. Thank God I never had to do it.
What about
That's the scariest thing in the world. I mean, he makes it look easy, but to get down there with your head between your knees, with guys lined up on you, and I remember in BC where I was the next man up if the guy was injured, and there's the opposing team's coach is sitting there with a stopwatch like 2 yards away from you as you're warming up, and they're like, geez, this guy knows exactly how badly I suck.
Right? Well, what about the club you had in Saskatchewan?
Oh, the disgruntled the Bitter Canadians Club, but it was shortened from Disgruntled Non-Import Long Snappers Association. Yeah. Because there's a while there, if you're like the non-import was not as valued as much as the American player for a couple of years. Every team's different, right? Yeah. But big Canadian guy, better go learn to snap, right? So we used to get up there. There's 4 of us.
But isn't that the Svet?
But so Randy Straczynski was a starter.
Yeah.
And then young Svetkovic came in there.
And Svetkovic's story, he played in Concordia, and he sent long snapping for his college teammate.
This is gold. I don't know if this ever went public.
Well, now it will be.
Yeah. So he was going into the draft. His buddy, who was a long snapper for Concordia, and Randy can probably tell the story better, but because he was there or knew the guy. But come draft time, the snapper wasn't interested in playing, so Svetkovic took that guy's game film and sent it up to the scouts and posed as him.
I think that's the legend. Now, it might not be true, but the legend is he sent the Concordia long snappers snapping film in on his highlight because Sveti was a great receiver. He was a great receiver, tight end, fullback, kind of like a H-back player. He could do it all. Yeah. But he needs some special teams film. I think he sent the snapping thing, and the Riders picked him up, and they had Straczynski and Sveti.
And Tyson St. James was there at the same time, yeah.
And in Sveti, I think he snapped 1 or 2 years with the Riders, and then he went to Winnipeg forever. And then Jocelyn Fournette picked it up for the Riders. But yes, you got to be ready to do anything.
Well, in such a niche position where, like in the NFL, you can make $1 million for being able to do that properly, right?
Yep.
And
well, and even longevity, 8 years. 26 seasons in the CFL. He's in Tom Brady
and still going.
It's still going, yeah.
Yeah, well, you never know.
You still got your Ryanson, right? Your Roger. So,
I got the one Roger. That's late October, November, 2 to 3 weeks. Give me a call, we'll get a ring.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Well, and you work a job that keeps you in shape. That's the other reason we were connecting between Expert VR, the training that you're doing. Like, I just love the fact that you're able to still compete after sport. Technically, you're still present. That's one of the things I wanted to talk to both of you about is like the fact that you've been able to transition from pro sport to business success. You're in real estate, you're flying drones around. Like, that's got to be a whirlwind feeling. I imagine 10, 15 years ago, you didn't expect you were going to be doing that.
Oh boy, I'll tell you, there's a story behind that too. I got recruited into commercial real estate like my last season, but that's when you start showing up in a suit and GMs start looking at you funny, like you're not as you're not looking like you're not looking like you're desperate for the job.
Okay.
So yeah, so in my career, when they weren't renewing me or they let me go 4 days before training camp, thanks a lot, Tom Higgins. I was kind of forced in a position. I could have gone on and played. My back was getting a little wonky, right? I wasn't able to quite change directions that year or the year before the way they needed me to. Although I think I still had a pretty solid year. But you kind of get forced into these decisions. For me, it's like I could keep playing this great game. I'd love to keep playing this great game, but I'm in Calgary. My wife was pregnant with our first child. And I'm like, am I really going to go chase around to some different cities to eke out a couple more seasons? Like, I had a good thing going in commercial real estate, just fresh started into it, just got licensed, was on a great team. And I just, made the decision at that point, hey, I'm 32, I can mostly walk. I can still wake up and put on my socks in the morning.
Something to be said about that.
So, but to say that it was an easy transition, no, because there's something about playing pro sports or playing in a locker room.
Identity
is so big. And the second that it gets taken away, the lights are off. It's done. It's over. I didn't even go back into the locker room after that because it was just, it was painful. I remember I was telling the story to Chevy. I made, for whatever ridiculous reason, I bought season tickets the next year for the real estate team, right? So we're sitting on the 50-yard line, just behind the Stamps defensive bench, 2 rows up. And I'm there at the first game, and things aren't going well with that new defensive line. Brian Clark, our all-Canadian middle linebacker, is just shaking his head. He looks up at me in the stands, and he's like, takes off his helmet. He goes, "Get down here," right? And I was like, "Oh, it just killed me." It felt good to be honored, but crushed that I couldn't step back on the field. And I wasn't like with Chevy. I wasn't willing to devote the next, however much time in my life to it. I had to make the decision that it was time to move on. Tough decision. But, there's something exciting about reinventing yourself too, right?
No doubt.
So, and I've done it a couple of times. I'm no longer in real estate. I started a real estate media company. Started with drones. Now we shoot, photography, interior shots, virtual tours, agent videos, walkthrough videos. I've shot some weddings. I get to do some really amazing stuff, and it's only my second, third year. So, here I am, late 40s, still reinventing it and having some fun.
Yeah, I love it. You brought up a guy like Henry Burris. I grew up watching BC Lions, Dave Dickinson, Travis Lulay, G. Simon, Paul McCallum,
Buck Pierce.
Buck Pierce. There you go. That's free. Yeah, that's a throwback. And I want to touch on training because you touched on it. You're still able to brush your teeth, put your socks on. Some guys grow through the years and they don't have that same ability as they age out of their sport. Is there stuff that you did during your careers?
I'm going to start with this one. And Chevy is Mr. Football, and he is the trainer. But I met a guy. It was my first year with the Stampeders, getting ready for the season. The guy's name's Ron Jarrett. You know him now too. Up until that time, all my training had been bench press, squat, and power cleans. Okay. I met this guy, was asking him a couple of questions about a machine to use. He goes, "Well, those are for what you needed." He goes, "That's not going to do anything for you, but I'll show you." And I'm watching him train this lady. He's probably mid-40s, 50. And his attention to detail, and it just instantly just started watching him. I'm like, this guy really knows something. So I sat down and started training with him, and we hardly touched any heavy weights. Everything was flipping tires, swinging sledgehammers. This is 2003. This is where training changed a lot. You can power clean, but if you take a 400-pound tire and you flip it and then run around to the other side, you're really building that defensive line core, building that stable strength from an unstable base. One-arm dumbbells, climbing ropes, and at the end of every workout, he would have us do reverse Spider-Man up the stairs. So that's crawling with your feet first and your hands on the floor, and you just crawl all the way up, and then the scary part was crawling all the way back down.
As the shoulders came out.
Yeah.
Well, and a guy like Matt Nickel, you guys both know, I've seen you guys on Instagram follow each other. Maybe I'll let Mr. Football go next.
Well, coming from McGill, I was in education. I was specifically in phys ed, and there was a very strong sports science program there. McGill's always been closely associated with medicine and kinesiology. And I think it was before kinesiology really became this huge field. McGill was kind of at the forefront of that stuff. And Matt Nickel was actually one of my best friends in college. He was sort of my mentor on the defensive line for a couple of years before he went on to become big time famous trainer he is. And I've always been a student of fitness, student of movement, student of sport. I love that stuff. Like I grew up just playing, and then I learned to train. I enjoyed training. And so, I always wanted to learn how to be stronger. I wasn't very genetically gifted. I was not. Like if you saw a picture of me in high school, you'd be like, that guy is not going to the NFL.
He's not kidding.
Like I was a twig, and I wasn't like, and there was no secret sauce. It was just hard work for me. But, Matt, as my career took off professionally, Matt, his career took off professionally as a strength trainer and coach. And he really introduced a lot of those concepts that, many people do now. Like Sheldon talked about, that functional fitness. Mm-hmm. It's not just about bench press and deadlifts and squats. Those are important, but you got to be able to move your body in space. You got to be able to recover. You've got to do the things that allow your body to get up and do it the next day. And so my training evolved from, what I learned in college, which was, heavy day, light day, run, to more functional fitness every day. So that's how I train. I always train full body. I'm not in the peak, I'm not at the peak strength I was when I was at my peak at McGill, but I'm not just training bench press twice a week to train to be a 425-pound bench. But I can last longer in any sport. I'm more agile. I'm more athletic. I recover better. Even at 47 years old, I'm still, knock on wood, not too many major injuries. And so I always kind of devote time to that. It's important to me. Okay. Sheldon, when I hear him talking about his career and, the transitions and what he's doing now, I see the smile in his eyes. Sheldon always loved to pilot. We actually worked real estate together, and I found out early on I wasn't cut out for real estate. But he always talked about flying, and then now he's flying drones. He's doing drone photography.
So you got my pilot's license too.
Yeah, and he's got an eye for it. He's doing what he loves, right? And he's finding joy. And even us bringing the Chevy Nasty show together, it's joyful for us. And the training is the same thing. It's a joyful thing. I love to train. Hopefully it rubs off on my kids that they want to be lifelong movers, because I do think it's important. Maybe it's the fear of aging. Maybe it's the fear of disease. I don't know what it is, but I use it as part of my daily routine. Like obviously being a firefighter, you have to be in shape. I have a role now where I actually don't have to be in shape. I'm a community safety officer. I sit at a desk. I go do presentations. I go educate. But it's still very, very important for me to be at my top physical performance. Whether I get a phone call or not to play again, I don't know if that's going to happen.
One more Roger and me.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's just, I trick myself. I'm constantly tricking myself to be ready. I don't know what I'm ready for, but part of being ready for me is being in good shape.
Zombie apocalypse.
Yeah, zombie apocalypse. A couple of.
Yeah, a couple of them.
But yeah, so that's always been at the forefront in my life. I need to move. I need to move to feel good. And I like doing all kinds of things, whether it's playing ball hockey, whether it's running, whether it's lifting weights, swimming. I like to do that, and I feel good when I do that. It brings me joy, for sure.
Yeah, movement's medicine at the end of the day, right? I love the fact that we're able to showcase what you guys are doing, because not enough people are getting the additional insights that they could use. The Athletes Podcast is only once a week. People need other sources of information. You guys have an incredible career to be able to talk about insights that you can share.
But we'll get if you were a guest on our show, we talk about all your shit, because that's so cool too. Like one of the best compliments that we got was from Coach McKay, a junior football coach here. Okay. That he said, when Chevy sent him episode 1, where first thing, he's like, he goes, that was really good. Only one thing pissed me off, and that I felt like I should have been sitting there right there with you guys, and I wasn't. Right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of the feel we want our thing to be. Yeah. Some inspiration, not a whole lot of education, other than if you're smart, you can pick up the education of, from experience, right?
Yeah, no doubt.
I don't think we're going to lecture or anything like that too much.
No, I think, our thing is great stories start great conversations. That's all we want. Anytime we've ever sat for coffee, it's like, man, that was a show. Yeah. And why aren't we doing this? And even today, I as you could probably tell, we probably talk for hours right now.
Yeah.
just because there's so much we could cover. But they always say save it for the next one, I guess, hey?
Yeah, I feel like I could ask you guys a million questions, but as you know, the way we wrap up every episode is we ask our guests what their biggest piece of advice would be for the next generation of athletes. Between the 30, 40 plus years of cumulative experience that you guys have, I'm sure you got a little tidbit to share.
You got to be real, and you've got to chase your own dreams. There's a lot of things that people are going to tell you that you're going to be good at, or that you're not going to be good at. With my son, he's 15. We put him into football. He started as a defensive end right away, and at the end of the season, he's like, "Dad, did you play because you were good or because you liked it?" I'm like, "You don't like it, do you?" He goes, "Dad, I just don't like it." I said, "Each person has to find their own tuning fork," and for both of us, I think we found that it was through football that the tuning fork went off, and from that point, there's nothing else that I wanted to do. Without that, don't chase somebody else's dream, and at the same time, don't listen to somebody tell you you're not good enough to make it, because what do they know? How do they know? Yeah. Back to it. Follow your own inner tuning fork, and just pursue it with everything you got.
And crush a couple steaks at Nick's.
Crush a couple steaks at Nick's.
I'm sure that'll help. What about you, Chevy?
So for me, I'm a quote guy, and I like writing. I love writing, and I write my own quotes. And when I thought about, where I came from, and I think about giving advice to kids, it doesn't matter if it's a boy or a girl, anything in between, immigrant, it doesn't matter where you're from. I always say this: don't let the roof over your head be the ceiling to your dreams. Because it doesn't matter what your situation is, wherever you are is just perfect for a start, and you can build and you can go wherever you want. So that's what I would say. Whatever roof you have over your head, it's not the ceiling to your dreams. Like you can do it, but you got to put in that work.
I sincerely appreciate both of you coming on the Athletes Podcast, sharing your time with us today. It's been an honor. Can't wait to keep in touch, follow along your journey. I really appreciate both of you guys' time.
Thanks, David.
Thanks so much.